everyone, it's Kerry back with you today. So I've been having a lovely time making all sorts of different paper beads and little dangly bits, and I really enjoyed making these ones that are sort of a bit grungy with fabric and leftover scrappy bits and pieces. And I was also inspired by some that I saw from Andrea at Artie Mays. These ones aren't finished, this is just one little portion of the dangle made with miniature spools. And then I've also been making these paper beads where we've got eyelets in the ends just to sort of finish them off. And then I've also got these ones here which I have made using some labels, and I wanted to be able to create a whole bunch of paper beads in a short amount of time that were of a similar theme. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways that I've made some of these today. We will make some of these ones with the tape measure, and I'll also show you how I've made these label ones. And if you're interested in seeing any of the other ones, just leave a message in the comment section below and I can come on and show you how I've done that as well. So I'm just going to pop these to the side. And you can probably already see here I've got a whole bunch of strips that I have cut. These ones I have printed on newsprint paper, so it's very easily pliable paper. And these are from Reenie's, I think it's the Grungy Vintage Elements kit or something like that. And then I've also printed, I've also left some that I haven't cut, so I'm going to show you how we're going to use this one. And then I've also got some other bits and pieces from the Grungy Elements kit that I used to make these fabric ones. Now you don't need to use these are just what I'm using today, but you can use anything you like. You can use book page, magazine images, other digitals, anything. So for those of you that have seen traditional paper bead making, you usually start with a very long strip, usually longer than this even, and sometimes it's cut to a point, or sometimes they're cut in different shapes which will give you different bead outcomes. But for the purpose of this video I'm just going to snip this end, and usually they would be cut sort of on an angle, and then when you roll it up it tapers on the ends and gives you a different look. But I wanted some straight looking beads, and then basically what you do is you start by rolling the paper, and then you can roll it. Some people do it on a toothpick or use a quilling tool. Basically you just roll it. You sort of got to try to keep it straight, and then you might want to add a little bit of glue as you go. And once you've got it all rolled up, you sort of got to try and keep it fairly tight. Then you would just add a bit of glue to the end. And continue rolling. And then basically you end up with like a paper bead that you can thread using the hole. Some people like to use UV resin or embossing powder to create like a glazed look around the outside, make it look very shiny and almost like ceramic. You can also use Mod Podge, that sort of thing. And then you just end up with these paper beads. So whilst that's fairly straightforward and simple, it is a little bit time consuming. It can be very fiddly, and I wanted to see if I could find another way to create my beads. And I had in my stash a packet of these brown paper straws, and funnily enough they were perfect for the eyelets that I have. Now eyelets come in all sorts of different sizes. I've actually got some giant ones that don't fit these straws, but I'm going to show you how you can use them. Or you might not want to use eyelets at all. You can just, once you've created your bead, this paint was a bit old when I was using it, but once you've created your bead, if you want to have some sort of cap on the end of it without it looking perfect or metallic or whatever, you can just squeeze a little bit of acrylic paint down and then just dip the ends of your bead into the acrylic paint, and you'll end up with a sort of grungy looking bead like this. So the first way I'm going to show you is I'm not going to add any thickness to the paper straw at all. All I need to do is pick a piece of one of my strips. So we'll just go with this one. And I'm just going to bring my glue book in. So I'm just going to add some glue to a couple of inches of the paper here. Probably about 6 centimetres or 2.5 inches, something like that. And then basically I just line the paper up with my straw, and I find this easier if I do it so that I'm looking down, because I can make sure that the paper, if I move this hopefully you'll be able to see, the edge of my paper and my straw, I can eyeball it and make sure that this is straight, and when I stick it down onto the straw and roll it back to pick up the edge, so I've got a straight line here with my paper. And then all I'm going to do is roll it till I get to the end of my glued section. And once I'm to the end of my glued section, I'm just going to tear this paper so I don't get a harsh line. And then I can fiddle with the edges with the glue stick and make sure that everything is lined up here. It's not sort of hanging over or whatever. Then I'm just going to come in with a pair of sharp scissors and cut through the end of my straw there. Just need to trim a tiny bit off this end as well. Now it will squish your straw a little bit, but it doesn't take much to manoeuvre it back into shape. And if you are popping an eyelet in the end, it doesn't really matter if it squishes, because the eyelet will round it back out again. So I just pop a little bit of glue in the end, and I pick out a couple of eyelets. I like to use two the same colour. So I've got this sort of rose goldy coloured one, and then pop a little bit of glue in the other end. And I sort of just squeeze a little bit out and then use the tip of my glue to spread it around. And if you end up with a glue blob in the end like that, it doesn't matter. Once it's dried, we can poke a hole through that so that it will still be a hollow bead. So once I've popped those in, I just set it aside to dry. So it's pretty quick to make them like that. But an even quicker way for this particular style, where I'm using these rulers, so I've got a piece of paper here with the rulers printed on them, and I've just cut the edges off so I don't have any white bits. And all I'm going to do is get my glue paper. Just make sure that I don't have any glue already on there, because this newsprint paper tears pretty easily. Now you don't need to use newsprint paper. I just used it because I had it. You could use just regular paper. I wouldn't print it on a heavyweight paper because it will be too stiff. So I'll just bring this in a bit more so you can see. And again, I'm going to pop glue on about the first 2 to 3 inches of the paper. This glue stick is quite gooey. We've had a lot of hot weather here, and the glue sticks, I think once they get sort of that gooey, they just don't recover. They either dry out or they just stay gooey. So I'm just going to turn that over. So then what I'll do is come in with a whole straw, and again I'm using the edge of the paper to help me get my paper straight with the edge of the straw. And I'm just going to press on that straw and roll it into the paper. Now my glue has oozed out a little bit, so I'm just going to take that out and pop it on the desk. And then I'm just going to start to roll. Now, if you go off course a little bit, it doesn't matter, because you're only travelling a small distance, so it's not going to make a really big difference to the finished look of your bead. but you do want to try to keep it as straight and as firm as possible. And then once you're getting towards the end, I've already got a fair bit of glue on there, so I'm just going to use a craft knife and I'm just going to slice down on that paper. I don't think that was very straight, but it doesn't matter. And then I'll just roll my paper straw to help get out any air bubbles that might be there, and also firmly attach the edge of that paper. This also helps if you've got any big glue lumps like I did. Alright, so that seems to be stuck down there now. So if you don't have a good pair of scissors that will cut through this amount of paper, you might want to use a craft knife. So you could come in with a craft knife and look where you want to cut. So I think I want to just have a look about there, and I'll just gently rotate the straw as I'm cutting. Now ideally you would wait for the glue to dry, just so you don't tear the edges. Okay, so that's one little bead. But I'm pretty happy with my scissors. So I'm just going to come in and cut my straw along the lines of my paper beads. Okay, so now I've got all my beads cut, and you might want to come in and pop some ink on the edges. Okay, so now I've got, what have we got, 3, 6, 9, 12 paper beads, and we've made those pretty quickly. Now obviously if you've made the rolled paper beads, you've got a much smaller hole in the middle compared to these ones. Just trying to find one without any glue in the end. So this one's got a much larger hole, and you can't really put an eyelet on the end of these very successfully unless you sort of tried to hammer it in or something like that. So each have their sort of pros and cons. I actually quite like the larger hole because it lets you thread them onto things like, you know, fibres and things like that. So if you're making a tassel, you can thread your beads on much more easily with a bigger hole. And if you were making some kind of beaded dangle, and so I'm not sure if you can see, but this one has a large hole, you can easily use either bead caps or a bead to make it more stable within the hole. But if you're just using it as a dangle or some kind of, embellishment on the spine, it really doesn't matter if it flops around a little bit, in my opinion. So that's those ones, and they were pretty quick to make. So the other ones that I have been making are these ones here, which I've been making with labels that we would, stick on our work. So I'll show you how I've done those. I'll pop these to the side here. And it's very similar to the way we made these ones. Now, I cut these specifically where the edges of the rulers were, but if you were using a different kind of paper, for example, book page or ledger or something else that didn't have specific breaks in the paper, you could just cut them to whatever length you wanted. So if you wanted, 10 beads and you wanted them all to be 1.5 inches long or whatever, you would be able to do that to suit your project. So I'll just bring in a couple of labels. So I've got one like this, and let's bring these ones in as well. So again, I'm going to be using the straw, but this time I'm going to use some eyelets that I have that are way too big for my straw. So I have these, but as you can see, they are bigger than the straw, so they don't fit. So I found a way to combat that, and I do have some larger ones that will fit in the straw. But I want to use these much bigger ones. So what I want to do is figure out what width I need my straw to be first, because I'm going to use this label. And I need to cut 2 pieces of my straw to that length. Now it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. So I'm just going to sort of eyeball that. Cut that there. And then using the first bit, I'm going to cut a second one. Now it doesn't matter if they're not 100% accurate. So I'll leave that to the side. And then I'm going to take my scissors and slice my straw open, longy ways. Just made a big mess all over my fingers with all that inking before, so sorry about that. And then I'm going to force my straw open. Then I'm going to pop a little bit of glue on one end of my open straw. Grab 2 eyelets the same colour. And I'm going to pop my large eyelet in the end of the straw, add a bit of glue to the other side, and pop the other eyelet in the straw, like that. I'm just going to pop a little bit of glue on these exposed pieces of eyelet. Then I'm going to take my other piece of straw that I cut, make sure I don't have anything in the way. Then I'm just going to sit that other piece of straw over the top, push it down. Now I'm not sure if you can see, but this piece is ever so slightly longer, so I'm just going to finagle that eyelet so that I'm tucking the ends of the straw in. And like I said, it doesn't matter if one is slightly longer than the other because you won't see it once it's wrapped up. Now, depending on the strength of your straw, you might end up with a little bit of a curve in the middle. I've got one, but it's so slight that I don't think you'd ever notice it. So now I'm going to get the label and make sure that it fits. Now I need to trim my label ever so slightly. So I'm going to take a tiny bit off that side and a tiny bit off that side. Check again. Yep, that seems pretty good. And then leaving the left hand side of my label as it is, I'm actually going to cut the right hand side of the label down where these two corners are. So the reason that I do that is so when I've wrapped my label, you cannot really tell where it starts and finishes. So on this one, for example, here's where the cut is. If I hadn't cut the edge off, you would have had the end of the label shape folding around the edge of the bead, and I just wanted it to look like it continues. So I've actually printed these labels on sticker paper, which makes it really easy for wrapping these beads. So all I'm going to do now is peel the back off. If you don't have label paper or yours are printed on plain paper, then you're just going to use a bit of glue and trying to make that as straight as possible. I pop that on and then I just start wrapping my label around my bead. Now if you're worried that your sticker paper isn't going to hold, you can pop a little bit of glue at the very end, but as you can see the join is here, but you can't really tell because I cut the end of this label off. If I had left this end on, it would have looked like that on the bead. So there we go, that's another one. So it's similar for these smaller ones, but you can actually sort of mass produce these a little bit. So all I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to cut on this right hand side to get that sort of edge off, and then I'm going to do the same on this one. I'm just going to cut that edge off. I'm not even going to trim this label down because that's going to be tucked on the inside. So now I'm just going to take my label and it's just easier to get it straight if it's on the table. Tuck that in, roll it up. Now this one I'm not putting the big eyelets in. I'll just use the standard eyelets which already fit, so I don't need to slice my straw or anything like that. So you could go along and fill the whole thing up, but we'll just do 2 for now. And so I'm not sure if you can see very clearly, but my label is ever so slightly not on top of each other. So all I'll do when I trim it is trim off that where the white is, and then you'll never know. And coming in with some ink. Now if you're worried that you're going to see the inside of the tube once your project is finished, you can always come in with a little bit of black acrylic paint on a skinny paintbrush, or even just on a toothpick, and just wipe it around the inside of the barrel there, and you won't be able to see that white anymore. So there we go, another couple to add to the collection. So there we go, some lovely little beads that we can use in our dangles and those sort of things. So I would set these aside to dry completely before you use them. And then once you have let them dry, so here's some that we made, or that I made earlier. If you do find that your tube is blocked from the dried glue, you just need to apply, or just need to poke it with your pokey tool, and you'll be able to thread that onto your project without any issues. So I hope you have a go at making some. They're really quick and fun to make, and I think they look pretty cool. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you again next time. Bye!